If you love emotional stories that touch the soul, make sure to subscribe, because the next one might just change the way you see love and life. The cafe was warm, a little hidden corner of the city tucked inside a glass building where golden light spilled gently across polished tables and smooth jazz filled the air. On any other night, it would have felt serene, but Ava Monroe's heart was racing as she stepped inside, holding the hand of her 5-year-old son, Liam. Comment below and tell how you liked the story so far. Her white dress shifted with a faint breeze, elegant but modest, the kind of dress that looked lovely without asking for attention. Her blonde hair was pinned back, though a few strands had slipped loose, brushing against her cheeks. She looked beautiful, yes, but there was a tiredness in her eyes, not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much for too long. She scanned the room nervously until her gaze landed on him. Julian Cross, sharp jawline, storm gray eyes, a suit that seemed carved for his frame. He looked exactly like the photo her friend had shown her before setting them up on this blind date. Composed, still unreadable, one hand resting on the table, as though even in leisure he was braced for impact. Ava hesitated. Then, with Liam clutching her fingers, she made her way toward him. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice quick, apologetic. "I couldn't find anyone to watch him. If this ruins everything, I understand." But before she could finish, Liam tilted his head and studied Julian with wide, curious eyes. "You look like the man from the park," he said matter-of-factly. "Are you still sad?" Julian froze. The voice, the words, the tone, it was the same. 2 years ago, a rainy night, a bench in the park, his suit soaked through, his world falling apart. And then that voice, a little boy with big, serious eyes that held out a crumpled tissue and whispered, "It's okay to cry. My mom says hearts just need hugs sometimes." That moment had stopped him. That child had anchored him to life when he was ready to let go. And now, impossibly, the same voice sat before him again. Julian's throat tightened. He swallowed, managing a faint, almost reverent smile. "Don't apologize," he said, his gaze fixed on Liam. "I think I owe your son more than you know." Ava blinked, confused. "I what?" But Julian only shook his head softly. "Please sit." Still uncertain, she settled Liam in the small chair beside her, then lowered herself across from Julian. Liam, unfazed by the tension, pulled out a packet of crayons and began scribbling happily on the children's menu, as though this was just another ordinary evening. Julian watched him for a long beat, his expression unreadable, then murmured, "He's sweet." Ava smiled faintly, resting her hand on her son's back. "He's my whole world." The cafe's soft clinking of cups and murmur of voices wrapped around them as silence fell. For Ava, this was unfamiliar territory. A first date, a stranger across the table, and the weight of her son's presence pressing in. But for Julian, this was something else entirely. It was recognition. It was fate looping back around. And for the first time in years, he felt something stirring deep inside, a fragile, hesitant hope. The air between them carried a strange tension, not uncomfortable, but layered, charged with something Ava couldn't quite name. She shifted in her chair, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and tried to steady herself. Comment below and tell how you liked the story so far. Blind dates were awkward enough without bringing your child along. Yet Julian didn't look annoyed. If anything, he seemed calmer than she expected, his attention torn between her and Liam, who hummed himself while coloring clumsy blue clouds on the children's menu. "You're quieter than I imagined," Ava finally said, her voice light but cautious, hoping to break the silence. Julian's lips curved faintly, though it wasn't quite a smile. "I'm just remembering." His eyes lingered on Liam, softening in a way Ava hadn't seen before. "Your son. He reminds me of something important." Ava tilted her head. "Something good, I hope." "The best," Julian murmured, though he didn't explain further. His tone carried a kind of gravity that made Ava want to ask, yet something in his posture told her not to. The waitress passed by, placing a basket of warm breadsticks on the table. Liam's small hand shot out immediately, tugging one free. Ava laughed, gently scolding him to slow down. The sound of her laugh, genuine, unpolished, caught Julian off guard. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sat across from someone who didn't measure every word, who wasn't trying to impress him or angle for something in return. For years, his dinners had been filled with negotiations, veiled compliments, and hidden motives. But here, a tired single mother and her curious little boy were treating him like just a man. No titles, no power, just human. You weren't nervous about bringing him here? Julian asked after a moment. Her laugh was softer this time, tinged with honesty. I'm nervous about everything, but Liam is part of me. If someone can't accept that, then there's no point. Julian studied her. She wasn't trying to be profound, but her words struck him anyway. He respected her bluntness more than he could admit. The meal arrived. Pasta for Ava, grilled salmon for Julian, and chicken nuggets for Liam, who immediately dipped one in ketchup and proudly announced it tasted better than McDonald's. Ava flushed, embarrassed, but Julian chuckled, the sound low and genuine. It surprised her. It surprised him, too. Then Liam, with the innocent boldness only a child could manage, looked up and asked, "Do you have kids, too?" Julian froze. The question pierced straight through him. His gaze flickered, shadows darkening his expression before he forced himself to shake his head. "No," he said quietly. Liam studied him for a moment, then shrugged and went back to eating unconcerned. But Ava caught the flicker in Julian's eyes, pain, raw and unguarded, before it disappeared again behind steel. The moment lingered. Ava's instinct was to ease it, though she wasn't sure how. "I'm sorry if that was too personal." He doesn't always filter his questions. Julian cleared his throat, sitting straighter. "Don't apologize. Children ask the things adults are too afraid to." Something in his tone made her chest ache. She didn't know what loss he carried, but she recognized the weight of it because she carried her own. For the rest of the meal, conversation flowed more gently. Ava shared little pieces of herself. How she worked evenings at the library. How she once dreamed of traveling. How she learned to make pancakes from scratch just to see Liam's delighted smile on Sunday mornings. Julian listened, really listened, his storm gray eyes never drifting from her face. By the time they finished, Ava realized her shoulders weren't tense anymore. She had expected this dinner to be awkward, maybe even a disaster. But it wasn't. Julian wasn't easy, but he wasn't unkind. The night had settled into a quiet rhythm. Most of the cafe's earlier crowd had gone, leaving behind only a handful of couples murmuring over coffee and the steady hum of soft jazz. Ava glanced at the time on her phone and sighed. It was getting late. She should probably take Liam home before he grew cranky. Comment below and tell how you liked the story so far. Still, part of her hesitated. Something about sitting across from Julian felt different. Not comfortable exactly, but not unbearable either. For once, she didn't feel like she had to explain herself or apologize for her life. Julian noticed her fingers tapping lightly against a glass, a subtle sign of indecision. "You're thinking about leaving," he said quietly. Her cheeks warmed. "I don't want to keep him out too late. Tomorrow's a school day." Liam, oblivious, was now constructing a tower of empty sugar packets, proudly announcing it was a castle for dragons. Julian's lips twitched at the sight. He reached forward, carefully adjusting one of the leaning packets, steadying the tower. "There," he said softly. "Now it won't fall so easily." Liam beamed. "Thanks, mister." Ava watched the small exchange with a mix of surprise and something warmer. Julian didn't seem like the type to play along with child's imagination, yet here he was, holding up sugar packets like it mattered. For Liam, it did. She cleared her throat, her curiosity finally getting the better of her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. You said earlier that Liam reminded you of something important. What did you mean by that?" Julian's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected her to circle back. His instinct was to deflect, to bury the truth under polite conversation like he always did. But Ava's eyes, steady, open, searching, made it harder to hide. "There was a time," he began slowly, "when I thought I had nothing left. I was sitting alone in the rain, ready to let everything go. Then this little boy," he glanced at Liam, who was now humming as he drew circles on a napkin, "came up to me, told me it was okay to cry. That hearts just need hugs sometimes." Ava froze, her chest tightening. She remembered that night too well. Liam had run up to a stranger in the park, a man she could barely see through the downpour, and offered him the small comfort of a crumpled tissue. She'd been terrified, dragging her son back, apologizing over and over. She never thought of it again. Until now, her eyes widened as realization struck. "It was you," she whispered. Julian met her gaze, and for the first time, the mask slipped, the rawness there made her throat ache. "Yes, and I never forgot." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the truth settled between them, not heavy, but binding. Ava felt her heartbeat quicken, not out of fear, but something unfamiliar, something like hope. Liam yawned, his small body leaning against her arm. The innocence of his presence grounded her. She gathered their things, murmuring, "We should go." Julian nodded, but there was something in his expression, an unspoken promise that this wasn't the end. As they stepped out into the cool night air, Ava realized her life had just shifted, and for the first time in years, she wasn't sure that scared her or thrilled her. The city's streets glistened under streetlights, the pavement still damp from an earlier drizzle. Ava held Liam's small hand as they walked toward the car, her heels clicking softly against the ground. Julian followed a step behind, his gaze steady, as though protecting them without saying so. Comment below and tell how you liked the story so far. Liam tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, can he come with us? I don't want him to be alone." His voice was innocent, unfiltered, yet it struck Ava with the weight of truth. Children had a way of speaking what adults suppressed. Julian crouched down to meet Liam's eyes. "I'll be okay, buddy, but thank you for worrying about me." There was warmth in his voice, gentler than Ava expected. Her chest tightened. She had met men who wanted nothing to do with her son, who viewed Liam as baggage. Yet Julian, a stranger only hours ago, looked at him like he mattered. When they reached her car, Ava hesitated, fumbling with her keys. She didn't want the night to end, though admitting it felt reckless. "Thank you," she said softly, "for not running the moment you saw him." Julian's brows furrowed. "Running?" She shrugged, embarrassed. "It happens more often than you'd think. Men want the date, not the responsibility. I've learned not to expect much." His expression darkened, not at her, but at the thought of anyone dismissing her so easily. "Then they were fools," he said simply. Her breath caught. The words weren't coated in charm or flattery. They were raw, unvarnished, and they reached places she had long buried. Liam yawned loudly, tugging at the car door. Ava bent down to buckle him into his seat, her movements tender, practiced. Julian watched silently, struck by the devotion etched into every gesture. He had built empires, signed contracts worth millions, but none of it compared to the quiet strength of this woman caring for her child. When she turned back to face him, their eyes locked. For the first time, she didn't look away. The air thickened with unsaid things, questions neither dared to voice. "Julian," she whispered, her voice unsteady, "why do I feel like you're carrying something you're not telling me?" His chest fell. He wanted to lie, to shield her from the weight of his past, but he couldn't, not when she looked at him like that. "Because I am," he admitted. "I've lost things to people, and I haven't figured out how to stop running from it." Ava's instinct wasn't to pry, but to soften. She reached out, almost without thinking, her fingers brushing his hand. "Then maybe stop running alone." The touch jolted him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was an invitation. Before he could respond, Liam's sleepy voice floated from the back seat. "Mommy, I'm hungry again. Can we have pancakes tomorrow?" Ava laughed, shaking her head. "Yes, baby, pancakes tomorrow." Julian's lips curved, and for a fleeting moment, he let himself imagine it. Mornings filled with laughter, the smell of breakfast, the simple chaos of family. It scared him. It thrilled him. As Ava slid into the driver's seat, she glanced at him one last time. "Good night, Julian." He nodded, his voice low but steady. "Good night, Ava." "Good night, Liam." As the car pulled away, Julian stood on the curb, the cool night air brushing against him. For the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. And deep inside, he knew this wasn't the last night their paths would cross. The following morning was bright, sunlight slipping through the thin curtains of Ava's small apartment. The smell of coffee filled the kitchen, mingling with the sweet scent of pancake batter sizzling on the stove. Liam sat at the table, kicking his legs happily as he arranged strawberries on his plate like tiny soldiers. Comment below and tell how you liked the story so far. Ava flipped another pancake, her mind drifting back to the night before. Julian's words echoed in her chest. "They didn't deserve you." She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that, not until the weight of it settled into her heart. "Mommy," Liam chirped, "do you think Mr. Julian eats pancakes too?" She froze for a second, the spatula hovering midair. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Because," he said simply. He looked lonely. "Maybe he needs pancakes." Ava smiled, though her eyes stung. Leave it to Liam to speak truth with such innocence. "Maybe he does," she murmured. Later that afternoon, as she walked Liam to school, she found herself glancing at her phone, wondering if Julian would call. She wasn't sure if she wanted him to. She wasn't sure if she was ready. But the thought of never seeing him again left a hollow ache she hadn't expected. Julian, meanwhile, sat in his office high above the city, a steaming cup of untouched coffee at his side. His desk was cluttered with contracts and reports, But his thoughts weren't on business. They kept drifting back to a little boy's laugh, to a woman's tired but brave smile, to the memory of sugar packets stacked into a wobbly castle. For years, he had built walls to keep the world out. But last night, for the first time, those walls had cracked. By evening, Ava heard a knock at her door. Her heart skipped as she opened it to find Julian standing there, still in his suit, though his tie was loosened, his expression softer than before. In his hands, he held a small paper bag. "I didn't know how else to do this," he admitted awkwardly. "So I brought pancakes. Thought maybe you'd share." Ava laughed, caught between surprise and something dangerously close to joy. She stepped aside, letting him in. Liam came running, his face lighting up. "You came back!" he shouted, throwing his arms around Julian's legs. Julian froze, unprepared for the child's embrace, then carefully bent down to return it. His throat tightened, but for once, he didn't fight the emotion. The three of them sat around the kitchen table, laughter mingling with the smell of warm pancakes. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted. Ava didn't feel like a single mother struggling to stay afloat. Julian didn't feel like a man haunted by loss. They were just people, sharing food, sharing space, sharing something neither had expected but both desperately needed. As Liam chattered about dragons and superheroes, Julian and Ava exchanged a glance across the table. It wasn't a promise, not yet, but it was a beginning. And sometimes beginnings were enough.